do a little prep work.
Wow.
First, we need to review the March 4th minutes, ably prepared by our own Rebecca. Comments, changes, recommendations, clarifications for the March 4th minutes. Hearing none. Move to accept them. Jim,
Move to accept.
second.
Yes. Second.
Michael, all those in favor will accept these minutes. No objections. Okay, no objections noted.
Oh, Janet, actually saying something?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I didn't think to look over my shoulder.
Sorry, I'm abstaining just because I wasn't there.
Janet is abstaining. Thank you. Good. Respect to the agenda, I think we have some adjustments. I'm going to move to Michael on the Jane's Walk proposal you are making, which would utilize the Sylvania site.
Oh, you want to talk about that right now?
Well, let's just add that to the agenda,
Yeah.
shall we?
Mhm.
Under new business.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any business item? Besides the committee members. Very good. So, the way these, minutes, this agenda is constructed, there is a Hofstas House RFP. It's old business, and yet we are following up on the town's request that the committee produce a simple list of the potential uses of the house. And I would suggest that the visioning for the Hofstas House and the Hofstas House RFP are one item. Jill, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that you could couch it like that.
Well, let's leave things as they are, and we'll go right to town updates, and that would be Julie and Max reporting on those items.
Where did Max go? Max can update you
Okay.
on the remediation piece.
The ask.
Yes, I did get a little bit of an update from when they will be decommissioning some of the wells. And that should be happening in late spring.
Very good.
So that map that I shared with you at the last meeting, that all should be happening in late spring.
And how does that work? It's Ledvance's contractor?
Yes, that's not anything. It's a contractor of Ledvance. They will come and decommission those. We did request, I don't know if you'll recall, that we keep the shed.
Yeah.
They offered it to us and we said we would keep it. And the only other thing is that we did have a meeting with our engineer about a whole separate project, and we asked for him to for an update on where our plans are. And they had just completed the survey. So an actual existing as-is survey. And he hopes to have something to us as soon as possible. You lost Max. He came in and went out.
So.
They have enough copies.
Yeah, we're dependent upon Max for each of these three items of the RFP, the status of asbestos. And the grant application windows that we might want to talk about for 2024. Oh, I know, I'll ask you about my favorite hole in the ground at Sylvania, the dosing chamber for the wastewater that gets piped out to the lagoon, the one with the lid.
I believe that lid was addressed
Okay,
by Public Works.
Just an extra.
very good.
And Public Works was out there. John was at the last meeting.
Sure. Yeah. I need to- go ahead.
I have a question. I can't raise my hand on the screen officially, but Julie, I was wondering, since I wasn't at that meeting, if it's possible for you to send the map of what's going to be decommissioned?
Yep.
Thank
I can
you.
send that to you.
Very good.
Thanks.
I will try to do that right now.
Okay.
Send it to me too, Julie.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, Michael and I got our eyes on a lot of those vertical pipes and so on. For the most part, they're pretty vandal resistant unless you're really gonna work at it, to do harm. But it will be interesting to see how many of those disappear. I mean, we saw the map, but getting eyes on those things disappearing later in spring will be.
And that includes the boxes that encase them.
Okay,
And they are disappearing because they are testing pretty well. I mean, there's a reason they're going away.
So the plan was always at some point they would be decommissioned. I don't think anything's going away, but I think that airstripping system has reached its useful life of actually doing anything as meaningful. So I think that's why that's my understanding of why they're decommissioning those particular wells.
So I'm assuming
And the airstripping facility.
and the
It
monitor.
doesn't mean that they're not gonna still test.
Okay, so they'll keep the monitoring wells presumably.
The monitoring wells are all staying.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'm gonna send it to you right now, Janet.
Okay, thanks.
well, Max, we're ready for you for your town updates.
Don't have too many updates to give right now in terms of the grants updates. The Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission's offering their Ask Grant, which is $2,500 sort of seed money. This is what we applied for last year to do asbestos initial study, so we'll apply again this year. I think it's going to be due in a week or so, and we'll get the funding by maybe June. So that'll go towards testing the Hoff's house for asbestos.
And hazardous materials throughout.
Hazardous. Initially it was just this asbestos, but I can get more of an updated price on that.
Okay, because I
Well,
think
because
we can remind you that where the interest arose in the fall of 2022 to understand the precise scope of hazardous materials was through the Hofstas House subcommittee's desire, based on consultation with Joe DiStefano, to find out any and all hazardous materials that would have to be abated then for the purpose of the sale of the house or its demolition.
right.
So
Initially there was talk about trying to just do some initial studies to see how much asbestos is in the house. And that's what I can do with this grant, because I got an estimate from Lakeside that it might be a $3,000 expense to do it, just to see how much asbestos is in the house.
Mhm.
And so that's what I'm trying to get with 2,500 plus an additional match from the local budget. So I'm not sure how much I can get for full testing, at least starting with asbestos.
Janet,
Yeah,
did you speak up?
no, I didn't say anything just then.
Okay. Well, then let me try to clarify something. Well, the Hofstas House Subcommittee was after that suite of hazardous materials, which would be a burden to the town with respect to selling it for commercial purposes or other purposes. And that suite of interest hasn't gone away. We have a oil tank, we have hazmat in the basement, domestic hazardous material, lead throughout the house, vinyl asbestos tile, cementitious siding, that's asbestos, and who knows what else. So are we getting after all of that? Or are we not gonna end up,
Well, I understood what I thought was that the interior asbestos was sort of an unknown item, that's what we needed to test first. Everything else we can address at a later time when it comes to implementation, but I thought the interior asbestos was sort of unknown, and that's what we needed to test for.
okay, Gail?
That was my understanding as well. If we know there's lead present. If we were conveying the house to someone else, all we'd be obligated to say was, we know there's lead present. We wouldn't have to indicate precisely.
disclose it.
But are you seeing it,
1978.
are you seeing it wrapped on the heating system? The asbestos? I mean, where do you think it is? You remember looking, or did you see it and see it visibly?
Actually, there's a lot of fiberglass insulation in the basement. I didn't see any asbestos, but I don't have those eyes. I wouldn't know.
It's generally in pipe insulation. That's the most sort of insidious asbestos in homes generally, and I didn't see any present in there. Doesn't mean it's not there, of course.
There was some possibility, there was some insulation hanging right around.
Yeah.
That might.
That's right, right around the heat exchanger itself, yes. Okay. Well, as long as we walk away from this phase, into later in the summer, knowing what the total budget for addressing Hofstas House might look like with respect to hazmat, that's where we need to end up. Now, what we do with that information is subsequent to a different feature. So that's June, and the Hofstas House RFP. Is there any particular discussion there separate from the town's request that we talk about uses for the house?
I don't think there was
No.
anything more, just talk about uses.
That was the charge from the select board.
And once again, grant applications. What does the committee imagine we'll be trying to obtain money for at this preliminary state?
Right now, I know there's just the actual path and making the concrete area of the recreation complex. I know that's what the grant is potentially gonna be, but Hofstas House and the outer trail area, I assume it's kind of a question mark until we determine what we want to do with the Hofstas House. And then, well, more Dan's here to talk about trails a bit later, so I'm not gonna speak on that part.
Well, if we don't know where we're headed just yet with respect to grants, then obviously we're gonna wait till the presenting request occurs, if it's a trail, if it's actually implementing some or all of the capping design, and who knows what else it might include. At present, I don't know.
Well, I would think that we're gonna have to apply for the recreation plan,
The complex.
but
The
not,
concrete.
The courts.
the courts.
Courts.
Yeah.
Yeah, the courts will not be cheap.
The courts will not be cheap, so I mean, I would anticipate, and with that goes. I mean, I guess that's the capping essentially, but that's something that we'll have ready to go. And I was explaining, we met with Rob Prue. I don't know if you were in the room at the time.
I remember we met him about the Elm Street culvert.
Oh, right, and I said that we had asked and the surveyors had just been out and
Right.
that he would have it to us as soon as he possibly could.
Thank goodness winter was apparently delayed in December and January. We are only getting our snow this week.
Yeah, 18 inches of it. It's gonna be great.
Fantastic.
But I would anticipate those grants would be the first to roll out. But when, I don't.
Well, the congressional directed spending or the federal earmark item supposedly will be starting soon now that the federal budget's passed. But I don't know if recreation will be a priority item, or it's been a priority item in the past, but especially with budgets the way they are now, I don't know if recreation projects are gonna get funded. So I'm gonna keep an eye on that, and by the next meeting, I'll either say it's been announced and I'm gonna apply, or it's been announced and I immediately had to apply because these deadlines are quick for some reason.
And the land water conservation, can you update us on that?
So for those who remember, we are right now not in good standing because we had the tennis courts over at 80 Gray built using these funds, but we never had replacements. We are hoping we do have a replacement a bit later on, but I need to work on that a little bit more. So that's maybe, land water conservation usually has, I think it's a June deadline. So I don't think we'd be able to apply this year, but it would probably be next year.
You expect to resolve your non-compliant situation? I mean,
I mean, I thought I was gonna resolve it last year too, but.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
they even brought to us an idea, Land Water Conservation brought to us an idea. Cause Damariscotta has the same issue. There's a couple of coastal, mid-coast towns that have an issue. Of how we could resolve it, but it would result in recreation in Camden and not in our own town. So there was a wholehearted, no, we're not interested response to that. So it may take us another year to resolve. We're not the only ones in this position, unfortunately.
It's fascinating.
All their contracts with the LWCF are in perpetuity, which means forever. And tennis courts don't last forever. So it almost, there's a lot of towns in that. They get swapped back and forth between different ownerships and get forgotten about. And then people are like, oh, we're building this Sylvania Park. Let's apply for LWCF grant. It comes back, no, because people are in these bad standards.
We thought we had it resolved last year. We really did, and it just
Yeah, fell through.
fell through.
And it's not my area of expertise, but I know that recreation funding is some of the first on the chopping block. But health and wellness is moving closer to the top of the chopping block. So how these grants are framed can be sort of critical in what we go after, and obesity prevention, all sorts of wellness.
And reuse of former industrial sites too. Those also started to get a little bit of a plus.
It's good it's not a brownfields.
Yeah.
But brownfields funding
Get
for
more money.
rehabilitation
Yeah, very careful wording.
has much more money attached to it.
You're technically not a brownfield.
No, we're a RECRA.
Oh. Didn't know that.
We're a RECRA site.
was a brownfield.
Nope, it's a RECRA site.
Brownfields would mean that it was abandoned by a previous owner. Whereas this time, we're talking with Lead Vance or Osram, whoever, we can still talk with them. They're still monitoring the site. But like over in Warren, there's a shooting range. That was an abandoned site. So that's a brownfield.
The other part of that definition is for a brownfield, the federal EPA is in charge of oversight, and for a RECRA site, the state DEP is considered not quite as much of a priority.
Yeah.
And when we did have that, I had that meeting with the EPA on site this summer. I tried to get them to give me an idea of maybe where we could find some funding. So he said if it was a brownfields, it'd be a lot easier, but we'll find something. I have faith. Max is now worth $2,022,000 in the grants he's received since he's been here. So I have lots of faith.
I'm getting lost too. I mean, at least it's at the budget formation thing.
Mhm.
It's just not. Sorry, Mike.
We were talking about the hospice house that who did the grants. I thought your question was about grants for the hospice house.
No, broadly speaking, we wanted to have some sense, we requested some sense of where we're headed for grant activities for the whole site. Okay. Comprehensively. But we'll get,
Are there grants available for just the
It
hospice house?
depends what we want to do with it. That's the big thing we have to kind of answer. If it's going to be a rehabilitation project, then there's certainly some to help fix up old historic buildings. If the decision is demolition, then not too much.
right. Well, thank you for clarifying the RCRA brownfields distinction, because the property I dealt with, in Delaware, the 148 acres that we purchased was a circle site, so we dealt directly with Region 3 EPA. And in this case, it's such a lower level of risk, and the abandonment issue, so I've forgotten that triggers everything else. In our case, by the way, in Delaware, we abandoned the site. County was one of 9 parties that abandoned the site, so we ended up acquiring the site back 20 years later. Yeah, it's complicated.
Jim was gonna say.
So even if we own it,
Mhm.
right? If it's a RCRA site though, Leadman still has some.
Oh, Lead Vance has skin in the
Skin
game,
in.
definitely. They have
So
the liability for what is there.
Right.
We can't add anything to it.
At least not that we know.
That, well, right.
All right, so is there a time frame to remove the RCRA?
My
The reason
under,
why I ask, if we keep eliminating all these different monitoring capabilities, is there a line of demarcation that if we achieve this, can we then look at that?
I have been told not in our lifetime. Well, at least not in,
Removing the monitoring capabilities doesn't alter the risk.
but I don't think they're talking about removing any monitoring.
oh.
It's just the extraction. I think it's the wells that the extraction wells is one of
Extraction
them,
and treatment.
and some treatment wells.
Are they down to PPB? Parts per billion?
I would not want to venture that without looking at a report in front of me.
I mean, the engineering reports show that all the time they've been doing the remediation, it's been fluctuating and there's not really a strong downward trend of removal. And so we were told by the engineers many years ago that we're talking centuries to get rid of it because a lot of it's in fractured bedrock and it just, you can't get rid of it. So that's the reality. And the remediation is just not pulling enough out to make it worthwhile, which is why that's ending. Or
And I don't think we'd ever get rid of the RCRA designation.
no.
But that also handcuffs us too.
It does. And it's the same thing with the covenant.
Yeah.
That we went through before.
So
It is what it is.
we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back.
Well, I'm encouraged that, to hear that, you feel, Max, you've got a path forward, and Marcus, you've got a path forward getting us in compliance for the purpose of Land and Water Conservation Trust. We leaned on that very heavily in Delaware, and you're going to need to do it here.
Local match and everything should be all set. It's a matter of just getting the $500,000 from Land and Water Conservation.
Any other comments on our grant path forward for 2024 presently? So it brings us to the request by the town for the committee to bring forward, let me state this correctly, for the town to receive from the committee a set of recommendations for potential uses of the town asset with respect to HOFSIS. As a town asset, its management, procurement, and development, how that happens is still undetermined. But the request is to figure out what uses town might be able to make of this building in some kind of restored, conserved state. And that may very well determine the path forward for getting community enthusiasm or support. With that, we received a lot of statements. And what I attempted to do in the memo that I churned out last night was to transparently convey only those statements that answer the question, which I refer to as the happy, easy task of just saying, what are the uses we could imagine occurring in this building if it were a town asset? And that's our task tonight. Can you remind us, Max or Julie, about what product is supposed to be coming out of this committee so that it's of use to the select and when that product should come out?
So it would be useful for them to have an idea of what the Sylvania committee is thinking about potential uses for the building. Any decision that is made, or it has to be approved by the voters. So if we are to accept, if the town is to accept the donation, I think the select board wanted to be able to convey to the residents in any type of a question what the proposed use of the building would be. So that they know, okay, we're voting on something that would house, and I'm just using this as an example, nonprofits, or this would be where potentially these offices could go, or we're going to have, a free dog grooming service, you know, whatever it is. Um, that it's part of the question and part of what we are explaining to the residents that we're asking them to support. And also what the potential costs are moving forward and how how we are going to address that. Is it going to be potentially taxpayer funded? Is it going to be fundraising? Is it going to be grants? What's the plan? So I think, first of all, we have to address, and what select board really wanted to hear was, what were the recommendations of the Sylvania committee, just to see, like, you know, do you support this? What areas of use do you support? Am I close, Bob and Mike? I think that's what the general
Yep.
consensus was on the select board, is they wanted to hear from the committee what your thoughts were.
I ask a good question. Hasn't the town recently, in the last year or two, looked at the space here and where they would want to add on to this building? I mean, do we already have a sense of like how many more square feet that the town office would like to have as a guidepost?
So I don't necessarily believe that we had an architect come in and teach us to show us how to live happier lives. So that it was all centered and begun because of the EMS overnight, which we've resolved. We now have the proper number of sleeping rooms. So that's one aspect of it. One of the things that I would say has caused a little use of office space that we didn't anticipate way back when was the community navigation. And also, Marcus doesn't have have a space. He doesn't exactly have a space, which we've always envisioned being at the community center. But and I'll be honest with you, the community center vision that we started with in 2019 is probably significantly different than what it was in 2019. And Max and I have discussed this, and we've started to have meetings with other interested parties who have expressed an interest. You would not believe how much interest has been expressed in a community center, and what everybody thinks should be there. And from many, we started out with our first meeting with childcare, because as everybody knows, Head Start, and we've had a wonderful relationship with Head Start, and they have from the beginning been very vocal about wanting to be included in any community center that we start. Anyway, we had the community center, but we had the first meeting with childcare, and what came up from that was Healthy Lincoln would like to have offices in Waldoboro. Obviously, the food pantry keeps saying they want a actual place where they can be and not have to worry about where their future is, and have it so that people can come in and actually shop, and they're not doing the bags, which is taxing on the volunteers. Again, where the community center will probably be located now, which is at with Maine Health on Depot Street. You know, it's a smaller area than any design we'd had before. So the potential for maybe utilizing this space is a little bit more appealing, because I didn't realize there were other needs as far as the nonprofits go for space. It was just eye-opening to sit in that meeting about childcare, and here I think there was 2 organizations, you know, that need space. So that was one thing, and you know, with that comes rental. So that's just another thing to consider. But as far as offices for here, the other thing that we have for the community navigator is that people who might need help, might be more wary of coming to the town office, because they can be seen, or, and this is no knock against our police department, but if they don't have their car registered, or if there's something that would make them feel uncomfortable about coming to the town office, it might be a good fit to have it off campus. Even though they can still go to the Y in Damariscotta if they're uncomfortable, it's not here in Waldeboro. So that would be that and recreation would be my top two offices that would need to move. Or
Okay.
find more space for.
What kind of space do they need? So,
Um,
I mean,
literally an office, like literally for the community navigation, you literally need a private space, just because you're interviewing clients. So you want to have a very secluded place that people feel a safe space.
In a waiting room someplace.
Typically, she books well in advance, and yeah, you'd have like a waiting room. And Marcus, I will tell you, Marcus just doesn't come, he comes with a lot of equipment at times. He really does. That we can't easily hide when he has 10 bags of 12 soccer balls each. So he does have some storage needs that come with him, but he would be better to answer that. I wish I could say it was just a space for Marcus, but like I said, he has a lot of equipment that comes with him.
Yeah, and just an office and then probably a separate room for storage would be great. Cause like I have to bring my stuff down from Public Works right now. I keep everything up there year round, but when registrations for soccer close and I get my 10 coaches, then I bring all the soccer balls down to the office and pump them up, and they're sitting there for when the coaches come to pick them up, and
When they drop them off.
I make kind of a mess for a few weeks here and there.
But again, we had always envisioned that going to the community center, but again, we haven't nailed down what exactly is going into that community center either. So that's one of the issues.
Well, that's one of the kind of concerns about the community center versus the Hofstas house. Can we live with new and old, and how do we make that work? I've been involved with the community center
Since it started.
since like the Mondovic Valley Community Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking back early 2000s. And the vision was that it was going to be down at the ball fields. Obviously, that didn't happen. So I'm torn, in all honesty, how I feel. Can we make it a viable situation that the townspeople will have an appetite for both? This is, it's something that certainly could fit in some of the things that you were talking about. I think they're very realistic, but I also know there are survey after survey after survey wanting XYZ for our seniors, our young people, our across the board. So I just don't want to lose sight of that.
That's one of the questions that we're going to put after we meet with all of these nonprofits and everybody, is actually the idea is to put that question to the public. Because
How many times have we done that?
well,
But this is more of.
That's
it,
what's really troubling.
But that's just, those are mostly concept things. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? This is us saying, before we actually get the numbers, this is what we are planning on doing. Is this something you want?
right. And I think that's part of the issue too, is the last time we did that was in 2020. We asked people what they wanted. It was more heavy on recreation. I can tell you now, and from what I hear now, it's more about, do we really need another gym? Is one of the big questions I'm getting. Or do we need more of a place where and Marcus will tell you we need a gym. 100%, he will tell you we need a gym.
Yeah.
It's where he can run his summer programming. There's a
Multi-use built space.
right, and that's what he would say. And yet there are people who would say the most important need in Waldeboro is childcare. And again, those are, I think that's been a shift. We didn't hear childcare as much back in 2019 as you do now in 2024. So I think that that will be interesting to see what the public wants. And I know you put out a survey on totally non-scientific survey on what's up, what's New Waldeboro. And what were the results of that?
It was interesting to see what people wanted, but, you know, there was conversation about like moving the food pantry, and there were all sorts of things about, it did emphasize childcare. I think part of the childcare issue is trying to get people to work. It's hard to work if you have.
And we wouldn't be, I just want to be very clear, we would not be running the childcare.
Just before we go any further, Janet, were you able to hear all that? For what
Yes.
Okay, I
Yes.
just want to be sure, because if you heard it, then that means the recording.
But I think that's why we need to do it one more time. And I have to be honest, the last time we asked the people, everybody wanted a community center, but they were only willing to put in $2 million for it of taxpayer money. So that was back in 2020 when we asked during the last presidential election. So it'll be interesting if we're putting what the needs are and then what the monetary contribution would be. I mean, we just went through this with the school bond that failed at the last November election. I want to make sure when we put this to the public, we've done our homework and they feel like they have been included in the process, and it's been very transparent, because that's the first thing that I don't want to make the mistakes and not have that information and not get their input for what we're trying to do. And so I think it has changed a little bit, but Marcus is still committed to the gym. I know that. And I think that all of those things have to be considered. In what
Oh, I
we're
don't
gonna do.
disagree.
Yeah,
I mean.
but you're
childcare is-
right. Are people going to want to fund both? And
Right,
that's a legitimate
that's-
question.
That's,
And
that's a troubling one.
you know, and I've been under the assumption that funding the Sylvania site would be slightly easier with grant funding through the land water conservation than it will be funding the community center. And at least if we have the first step, even if we have to phase it and say, this is our first step in this process, this is our next step, I think people would be more willing to support that instead of, eating the whole elephant at one time, to quote one of my select board members.
Barbara, were you gonna, I thought you were gonna read.
It's not really relevant. I was just gonna say, the summer rep program always happens like at Miller School, right?
Yeah, we use Miller School right now.
Yeah, and so it sort of works out okay. You get to feel it, you get to play, but you wanted something that's year round. Is
Yeah,
that what
so I mean,
you want?
yeah, it would allow me to run a lot more during the day, recreation, wouldn't just be nighttime stuff. We could, I wouldn't have to fight with the school to get the school. It's always a battle trying to get the school for summer rec and any other program. In the winter time, I can't get in the schools at all. Madonic youth basketball books every time slot all winter long. So if I wanted to run anything, I use the church a lot. They're great, but to have my own building, it would open up recreation possibilities a lot in town if I was able to have a gym during the day.
So there's a lot of nuance here in the way I'm hearing it. We got childcare, we got recreation, we got preschool,
Well, no preschool.
Head Start.
Well, okay, yes, but
Preschool.
but that's not us running it.
No, I'm not suggesting we're necessarily running any of this. We're trying to figure out what to put where for purposes.
Right.
And
Well, childcare can't be put at Sylvania, so.
fair enough. Okay, well then that and Head Start maybe are two of the similar concepts. I mean, if you're putting your child into Head Start, you're giving yourself some time that you wouldn't otherwise have to take a job somewhere. Or is that off? Am I off the mark here? I'm just suggesting that what we're talking about here is more nuanced than there's not necessarily this line of demarcation between the three of them. They're interrelated on certain levels. I think I'm just saying we need to be aware of what those levels are and how they might be complementary as opposed to you have one or the other. They might not necessarily be irreconcilable purposes. There might be commonalities there that we can exploit. That's all.
Right, and in a community center, optimally, you be able to utilize recreational facilities as part of the child center or a preschool program, like that's what community centers do. They bring multiple functions together. Different, so the opportunities exist for different.
Even for the seniors and
Yeah.
which has always been a part of it. It's just that, like I said, I think there's been a little bit of a shift and we just have to figure out what that shift is.
Yeah, that's a lot of second story kind of activities. I mean, big rooms and elevate, I'm just wondering if that site is big enough.
Well, and I
on
think,
Depot Street.
I think that's the other part that we're kind of getting ahead of. We're starting the conversations, just,
Mhm.
I think even in the worst case scenario, at least sees what the needs are in the community, like childcare and all the nonprofit needs. Just like how we have all the different comments from different members of the committee about different potential uses for the Hofstas house. We're seeing what might be good to have in town and what are some needs in town. But with the community center, we don't know how much space we are gonna get yet, because Maine Health is gonna put forward their planning board application. And that's how we're gonna know how much space we even get for a community
Mhm.
center.
I thought
It-
that was determined.
I mean, when I spoke with them and looked at the pre-application, but Barbara was involved and saw that as well. I think it was maybe 8,000 square feet is what we were looking at. They said that it's not gonna go any smaller than that, so I don't know if that means we only get 8,000. I don't know if we get a bigger space. I don't have an application in front of me, so I can't tell anyone what we're gonna get for a community center space.
We just want to, we want to know what our options are.
So I can
what people
understand
want.
you say space, you don't mean 8,000 square feet of real estate.
No, like a footprint, like building footprint.
A building footprint, the
Yeah.
limits of, not disturbance,
Could be-
limits of the physical building.
And it
Could be a
depends
second, we could put a
for the
second.
seconds.
Yeah.
Right, because the last one that was designed for the fields had a second story.
Had a gym on one end.
And then we also had like a mezzanine too, we talked about one of the many,
Many,
What was the
Many.
footprint of
I think it was a total of 16,000 square feet
the top end?
total.
So about what we're talking about, 8,000 square foot, 8,000 square.
what was our last number?
Well,
What are we talking about?
the original plan was about you came up with 24,000
Yeah.
square feet.
Yeah.
Of what you needed and wanted. And the old plan was about 16 to 18,000 square feet from what I recall.
I'd have to look back.
We'd have to go back, it's been
Yeah.
a lot.
I know the want list was 24,000. I don't remember the.
Right.
The design.
We shaved it.
2008.
Down.
They shaved it down.
What's the median cost per square foot for a gymnasium? I can talk residential stuff all day long, but does anyone know that number?
You had a number,
I can get it
2
from my
years ago.
successor in Kent County,
Yeah.
who built the recreation building that I couldn't build. I just find out, it's only 6 years old.
well, Marcus had done he had asked recent,
I talked to a few local directors that had built centers, but that was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I'd have to re-ask to get that number back. I don't remember.
So we could put some of these things at Hofstas. We could put elderly meetings, get-togethers, whatever, there'll be kitchen there. The only thing that we can't really do at Hofstas is kid stuff, childcare, right? And camps, but there's a number of, these functions that we've just been talking about that readily be at Hofstas. And then therefore a community center can be really a gym with meeting space kind of thing. And design maybe even for addition or something.
Well, there was more than just a gym.
Yeah.
There were offices, there were buildings, there were buildings that, have cardiovascular type stuff. Really, so would cover the broad spectrum of everybody. Unfortunately, it's taken so long. I was, 35 years old. when it started. I'm 70.
I know.
It's like, geez.
I know.
I'll
echo Barbara. We're talking about the Hoppus House, not
Right.
globally, the
Right.
recreation
Town
needs
needs.
and other needs of the community.
It's gonna be higher.
Are we going to put a question on the ballot? And what is the question that we're gonna put on the ballot about the Hoppus House, I guess?
And I would say that's what goes in it. We need to know what
We need
the,
to know what's gonna go in.
Right.
Yeah.
Cause I think that's part of the problem. We can talk all day about what it would take to actually fix the Hobbs's house. But if we don't have anything going in the Hobbs's house, we just worked all this time to fix up a building that's empty.
Well, it's not gonna be empty.
No, it won't be.
Marcus, you need an office. Karen Ann has an office, but if you,
But if they go to a
But-
community center instead,
I don't think that's the.
Marcus Stoltz doesn't have an office. He's sitting out in the middle of
oh yeah, I know.
you know,
It's not
I mean-
one or the other.
I mean,
It makes sense, the community center is gonna happen in a few years. And it makes sense, we've got houses
Right.
now.
we own the asset, which is currently undergoing demolition by neglect. We gotta do something with it. And I say, here we go. We're gonna put Marcus in it. Maybe, Mark, if he, Mark Stoltz, if he wants to go.
Mhm.
I don't know whether Anya wants to go.
got-
But it's an awfully crowded area.
Who's the alligator?
Karen Ann.
Aaron.
Karen Ann, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that there is some use for Marcus and the community navigator being there. Absolutely. I do think too that it's worth a conversation with some of these nonprofits that might want to have an office in Waldeboro that it gives you income then.
I understood.
Why not why not do it? Why not the Waldeboro Historical
So
Society?
I asked Bill to join us just to share his thoughts about
That's
the
a great
overlap
idea.
between Historical Society and the Hofstas House, and also just to make sure we all are clear about what the Historical Society is currently doing with their own building, so we don't keep confusing these two projects. So Bill, can you just give a little summary?
Thank you. Michael reached out early today and I really don't know what your questions are. I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability. I guess the first thing would be, we have a plan in place for an expansion at our present location. And this isn't something that was just thought up overnight. It's been I think this would be 2024 would be the 4th year of getting this plan put together. We didn't have enough room at the current location. There's artifacts up there that, as they say, hasn't seen daylight since I've been there. I've been involved since 2012, 2011, excuse me. We need more space, yes. We also have the West Waldeboro former community club building down by Dutch Neck. I don't know if everybody knows where that is. It's the yellow building before you turn off on the Dutch Neck, Gross Neck. That group folded about 8 years ago. And instead of putting it on the market, I think they reached out to the town. The town said, we don't want it, because it used to be a former school. And there was a clause, former schools had to get turned back over to the town. Town said, no, we don't want it. So they offered it to the Historical Society for the big $1 sale. We took it on because we figured eventually down the road, we could use the space, because it's just a one-room schoolhouse. And we could use it as a meeting area and also offer it to the community that needed a meeting area. But like any other project, there was a lot of things that need to be done. We're gaining there because all our money, it's all fundraiser donated, grants we are able to get. We're down to the point of taking the back addition off. That was a kitchen area, and re-shingling the roof. And we probably will be ready when we get that done to have it an annex to our existing museum. And the goal was to take a lot of things that are up here that pertain to West Waldeboro, Gross Neck, Dutch Neck area, and put down there on display. The big problem is we're all volunteers and all our sitters are volunteers. So to have a sitter up here every day but Tuesday from June to October, now we're gonna have one down there, so there's two people. It's tough getting people to volunteer and sit at the museum. The hospice house idea, I've had some conversations with Michael. It was probably 3 years ago, I think, maybe max. Bob Butler, Bob asked, would the Historical Society like it? We just don't have the funds, the means, and the manpower to do it. But we have all kinds of stuff that we could put exhibits in. That's not a problem. So if we got a lot of Sylvania stuff. We've got scrapbooks and photos. We could have a wall or a showcase just on Sylvania and that present area. We have a lot of Dr. Stahl stuff, which lived across the street. We could put some of his stuff down there. So, yeah, we could use the space, but not a whole house because we've already got our plan. Our plan up here is to be able to you come in one building and you'll be able to exit another building instead of going in and out, in and out. And it would all be handicapped so people can get around. And the big key, bathroom. Right now, we just have porta potty. And we're gonna hopefully have a bathroom in this plan also.
Might get more volunteers that way.
Seriously, that is a thing. We have a lot of people because it's a porta potty.
Well, what's the status of town water and town sewer at the Hofstas house? I
Oh,
know
I thought you were gonna say at the museum, sorry.
that's a pretty important fact in terms of a public space. A septic would never get permitted for a septic system there for a public space.
There's town water already there.
It is
And-
that.
Yeah, and town sewer goes to
Right about 200
right up
feet
to
away.
about 200 feet away.
But the house is not connected to sewer.
Not currently, no.
But it could be.
It could be.
Well, except you can't dig on the site.
No,
You can for utilities.
So you don't need an office per se, file cabinets, a one place to work, a telephone, you
No,
don't need that kind of.
Our middle building, which is the Hout Bailey building, we call it the brick building, that has heat. That's where our fireproof filing cabinet with all the records that we have.
Yep.
We don't have records for every family in town. We don't have records for every house. We've got one fireproof filing cabinet that's 4 deep. That's where we keep all our vital records. Don't really need an office. Jean Lawrence, basically, she's a retired school teacher, as you all know. This was a full-time job for her. But she worked from a house. She'd make an appointment, meet somebody at 9 o'clock, I'll meet them at 3, I'll meet them at 2. I do the same thing now, but people just have to wait till 3:30. Cause I gotta work. And I'll meet anybody at 3:30 on, and on weekends anytime. So an office per se, no, and we just had the internet hooked up at the museum, so we can have a phone line and we can take credit cards now when somebody wants to buy something. So,
The other issue that, as I sit here in this room, I think about is we do not have an alternate meeting room.
Mhm.
If we book 2 meetings, like we had to move EDC because we had to extend our budget committee meetings, so they got bumped. We used to have the ability to use the fire meeting room, which when we did all the changes for the accommodating the sleeping quarters for EMS, that our kitchen that was right here is gone now. So the only existing kitchen is over on the fire department side. So that would be a potential other use is, and we do get a lot of requests for use of a meeting room. We just had people doing taxes for seniors. And we do get a lot of requests for a meeting room.
Parking on that site will continue to be a challenge. So I don't even know. Hold any sort of code for parking, but it's certainly very limited the amount of people could meet there because they just can't drive it. Or park there.
Mm.
Now, I suppose you could perhaps park it at adjacent parking lots or something like that, but, and I think there's a lot of other peripheral questions that need to be answered before we go down this road. You know, just like-
I'm Janet here. I mean, it sounds like we need both spaces, community center and this, from what you're saying. I mean, that seems clear to me. So the question is, what's logical to have here? I mean, parking, I feel like we have plenty of parking potentially. It's comparable to what the town office has now. Once it's fixed up.
Not at, you're talking down at the park, not at Hofs's house, right?
Well, yeah, but they could be connected, I would think.
Yeah, and I think there's more there than it looks like from, can I just throw something out here too? Suppose we did a real stripped down program for what the community center is gonna be, so that we can use whatever land they give us to work from. But it is possible at the Hofs's house that we put a big ass simple barn building on the back and have that be a medium-sized community meeting space too. I mean, we could not only fix that building that has kitchens, plumbing, bathrooms, and all that kind of stuff in small meeting rooms, but that could be a mini meeting room until the community center, which I don't think is going to happen for years. Personally, I mean, don't you think it's going to be 3 to 5 years till we get a community center going? If we're super lucky with funding? Probably. It's just another way, we don't have to be just settled on the footprint that we're given. That little back building is not really worth anything. So, you know, maybe we need to put a medium-sized room on the back of the property and develop the parking. So that really becomes the entrance to the Sylvania paths and park. I mean, just to throw that out there.
Well, that wasn't on the sheet, but.
Big point on the parking. I wasn't thinking about the adjacent property, but
Nor I, because I was thinking in terms of what the user group that's arriving at odd hours during the day. It's a greater likelihood that they have either children with them or they're handicapped, limited, any one of a number of things. And the site planning and site costs around Hofs's aren't presently on our mind, but they're real. They're real dollars that have to be spent around the Hofs's house to make the space accessible and comfortable and usable. And, you know, parking lot's not free, and getting half a dozen parking spaces up there is a challenge, possible, but it's a cost center and we have to face that.
the average speed on that turn is 90 miles an hour.
Well, people need to slow down. We can't be designing the town around people speeding. We have to force them slowly to slow down.
It's the number one complaint in town.
It's the number one complaint in town.
I saw one of your finest sitting at the intersection of Cross Street and 32 recently, because I see a lot of people flying through there at 55 in that little cluster of houses, maybe 60. Yeah.
And as excited as I am about my downtown speed signs, I'm not convinced it's gonna. But anyway,
So do you wanna, Carl, do you wanna try to come up with 3 or 4 items that
Yeah,
We
at
can-
the end of the day, this is what the town has
we
asked us to
we
do.
can
Well,
agree on? or come
It
with
seems,
some
it seems pretty
consensus?
clear what they are based on what comments were submitted and what the conversation has told us. Overall, it's additional town office space with a focus on recreation and community navigation. And additional space for town meetings, committee meetings. That's it.
oh, wait,
There's also the question of cafe and concessions and bathroom for the park, which can easily be, certainly a bathroom has to be in the building. Can be presented as an extension of for the users of the park itself. And because of the kitchen too, possibly in the future concessions. I mean,
can we also include potential office spaces for nonprofits as a source of income?
yes, why not?
Sure.
But I think it would, we shouldn't spend too much time identifying those
Right.
potential nonprofits,
Right.
because that's when we're gonna get into very complicated discussions here.
Right.
But to me, the items I just listed, everyone agrees with, are very transparent. Yeah, that could form the question on the warrant. Except, yeah,
Yeah, Bill.
I just want to see if I've answered everybody's question.
right, I didn't include, yeah, and I did not include Historical Society on that because I
Just want
think
to know if
made it
anybody
clear.
had any more questions, I didn't want to.
Which is not to say that at the end of the day, a completely functional building doesn't have a space for a revolving small exhibit by the Historic Society, which we
Oh, yeah.
all
Be
would
allowed
be
to
very
do that,
welcome.
yeah. Yeah, be more than happy to.
Do you have much on the Hobson's house? I mean, the Hobson.
We got a file and we always can transcribe those documents and have them part of a notebook or an exhibit up there. So I just want to make sure I've answered anybody's, I know Jim had his hand up.
You basically answered that.
Okay,
I was concerned that maybe not having a legitimate office.
Yeah.
It might be an opportunity.
yeah.
At the-
Won't see an office for the Historical Society until probably they pay a curator $50,000-$60,000 a year.
The only thing I was thinking that, because you limited time frame, would it be worth having an office so that you could answer questions or have someone answer questions from all around the country during those off times when that is not open?
I do that I took the phone calls today. So. I just wanna hope I answered any questions. So,
It was
appreciate
perfect.
Yeah.
appreciate the invite.
Appreciate.
Thanks, Bill.
volunteering.
Yeah.
Hate to raise the questions, but assuming that's the direction we take as a priority for the Hobson's House, town-related functions, are we choosing the most economical and efficient way of doing it? And I think we have to answer that question when we put the question out there. Is there a better way of housing those functions than the Hobson's House? And at this point, I have to say, I don't know. There may not be, and especially if with the Hobson's House, we're able to charge rent to some folks who want to put offices in.
Right, but you're talking for, as far as the town goes, 2 offices and that.
That's right.
That's limited
Is
space.
putting 800,000 into that house minus the donation.
Well, I was assuming there'd be more offices other than 2 offices there.
Oh, okay. Don't we need to define what those would be?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we.
It's the
you know, that
nonprofit.
We're into it, based on all the comments we're saying, and if there's
Right.
a push to actually have the town move there, I think that's something.
Well, I don't think the town, I need to decide,
No,
because
no, I'm
this
saying
came
from
up
the
at the last
comments.
meeting, and I
saying
want to
from-
make sure everybody understands the town services as they exist here. The basic, you come to pay your taxes, the clerk, the town manager, the construction officer, everybody is here. Recreation and community navigation, which are community services, would be the only thing that I would say could be separated from this building with any type of ease.
Sure.
And and that seems like a good choice for a lot of reasons. If it's next to a park, having the recreation center there is great, and storage. And the community navigator piece being closer to the food pantry. I mean, I think it could be talked about as a fairly efficient thing to do if we think about it that way.
At the end of the day, I've listened to our recreation programmers for 15 years grouse about the fact that they had to leave the county administration building and drive 4 road miles to our principal recreation site, that we then developed some other sites, and then they were driving further. So I know what it's like to operate an increased scale of public recreation scheduling and providing the facilities and doing it remotely. So I have my sympathies for what you have to do. And I don't think anyone has ever supposed that Hofstas isn't going to be an ancillary park building, first and foremost, if it survives. And then secondly, other town offices. And then thirdly, other community services. I think we're fairly close to a tidy little list, as Michael says, of about 6 items in some sort of priority that could occur here within a few years. Question is that the best place to put the county, the town's funds to achieve those purposes? And the only thing I want to submit is that is the concept of what is your it? If the preservation of that house isn't it, it could be a sequential it. It could be a occupiable building, a sequence of restorations outside, and incrementally moving into more and more use in the building. Courtesy of Conrad, we have an accurate plan view of each of the 2 floors of that building. And we can understand by looking at that your offices here in the town can look at those and imagine what fits and what doesn't fit. And as a committee, we can look at that plan and decide what fits and doesn't fit. So I think the building could achieve a lot of purposes. It could do them over time if we have an incremental approach to its use. And it may be that we don't have to compete with your community center. Brighter people and more knowledgeable people will have to speak to that. But I would like us to move on towards a document to reflecting the consensus of this committee, whatever it may be, so that the warrant can be constructed around it.
I think Michael hit upon the ones that are really prominent, consensus strong. So, I mean,
So then how do we draft the question for the warrant? Does one of us work with Max and Julie and then
Mhm.
we come back? Then
Well,
that goes to
we've
the
got to
select
have that
board?
by April 14th
Right,
to
okay,
be able to have it on the June warrant.
so.
If we miss that date, then we're into November.
or do we need to give you the 4, 5, 6 items?
Well, yeah, we can do
and
that.
say, do you wanna help? I mean,
So,
if you guys
We don't meet
wordsmith
again
it,
before April 14th.
right, so I think we have a good list of what you think we should put forward, but I think you guys have to support it. Take a vote and see if you support that, and then
Yes.
that's what would go to the select board.
Do you think we should describe in any way a way of facing the property? So we're not taking the whole.
I think that would be really helpful.
Kind of like the RSU 40 thing,
Right, I think that would be
You know,
really, I think that would be really helpful.
making the first floor usable and heated and all that stuff. And face into second floor or something.
Even if you had to meet again next week,
With the fa-
We, if this is gonna be a warrant and we're asking the public, do we need to attach a dollar figure on it?
Okay,
I don't think it's necessary.
but how is the decision made then? If they don't know dollar figure or a roundabout figure. I guess I'm confused on the process.
Does this commit us to
Yeah.
not taking the building down by doing this?
Well, Michael, you and Conrad's grant, this very generous offer is contingent upon the town coming up with some money to basically finish the work. Because
Yeah.
that $250,000 doesn't do anything if the building doesn't get used. So we
Right,
gotta put a dollar figure on this, and maybe it's $800,000, maybe it's $500,000, maybe it's $250,000 matching funds to get as much as we can usable space out of it.
I think you have to give them the worst case scenario.
Well, a phased fiscal note would be not that difficult. I'm looking at Matt. A phased fiscal note about what it takes to preserve the exterior, bring it to a phase 1 restoration and an interior build out for occupancy and other phases in the future. I mean, is that something we could generate?
Yeah, like mid-range finishes, and I actually popped around there today just for a minute to remind myself of the, sort of amount of fenestrations and whatnot, like doors and windows. And certainly we could maintain some architectural integrity and do things properly, certainly on the eastern elevation on the street, really make that not worried as well. Yeah, we can make it look awfully nice, not do a Les Fossil full restoration. And Les has been doing this forever, a lot longer than I have, and does a wonderful job, but what he quoted there, sort of his back of the napkin quote, is not what we need to do. And I venture to say, again, we've been through this before, so and I looked at my notes from earlier. And I'd say, between 480 and 6 or so. So some of the questions I had were answered already in terms of, septic field and whatnot. But I think like mid-range to low-range finishes on the interior, adequate, very typical office type space, as opposed to a resident, a sort of a high end with residents with mid-range or high-range finishes, I mean, can be done for 600 or less. So,
In addition to.
no.
Incorporate.
So-
Okay.
Yeah, and there are value engineered approaches to every phase of everything.
Right, and that would be like encapsulation of,
Exactly.
you know, the lead would be addressed. And it would be abated through encapsulation or just removal and replacement. Depending on, you know, exterior, I mean, the big cost for lead abatement sometimes is sort of the cover and protect, and there's a lot of other issues with abating the exterior of a home. But if we encapsulated I'm not an asbestos contractor, I have a licensed EPA lead abatement guy, so I can't speak to that. But I know a bit about the,
This is not gonna be a residence though.
it's not gonna be a
Does it still have to be
residence, but
remediated if it's
well, it's
not a
certain-
residence?
if you're gonna put kids in there, like I hear a lot of different talks about different things, so it's sort of, it's dependent. I mean.
We
the
can't
lead's
put
not-
kids in there.
I don't think we can.
But if it's
Nobody-
it's a town public facility, that's the other thing.
We can't put-
You gotta tell, use
in
wait at the door.
Make it nice.
But there's not a state, there's not a lead abatement order on that building.
Right.
So, I mean, we could go in, we'll abate the lead, but mostly through encapsulation. I mean, if you pull down a window casing that has lead paint on it, that is fractured and whatnot, needs to come down, you pull it down, you replace it, that lead is abated, that gone, you've got new trim in it, and like, you know, Les would want to take all that out, bring it down to the wood, and then encapsulate it with, you know, Bitrex paints and all sorts of things, and that would be, you know, a very pure way to do that, and also exceptionally costly, and it's completely unnecessary. So, it's the lead abatement piece isn't that hard. The exterior soil and what, you can get a lot of cost in terms of replacing that and, you know, pulling out many yards and having that, and then this disposal costs and come back in with other things. So there are some costs there, but we won't need to do that. The asbestos is a bigger issue, and I can't really speak to that. We certainly can encapsulate it, and I don't think there's any of the most insidious asbestos issues in that place.
I don't either.
They're
I don't know why
minimal.
it costs $3,000 to test the little bit that might be over the furnaces. That's just for the testing, right?
How many square feet is it, Michael? Do you know? That doesn't totally, but is it 23-ish or something?
32.
Oh, it's bigger than I
Yeah.
thought. So, that includes that probably includes that attic space.
That does not, the total with the attic, including, is 42.
Oh, so that's going
There's a lot of attic space in the main
Yeah.
building.
I'd suggest we not finish the attic space. It could be for storage or something.
Sure.
Insulated.
But,
Ins-
you know, $200 a square foot might be doable with like a mid or low range finishes inside.
If we're gonna do this, we're gonna have to stay on the first floor, otherwise we run into ADA. So finish the first floor. Other areas would be storage, either the attic or the second floor for storage only. We have to spell that out, what exactly we're gonna do to the building in this warrant item and how much it's gonna be.
Well, while it'd be awesome to restore the double hung windows and the weight pocket systems and whatnot, which is, I'm really passionate about that personally and professionally, that wouldn't be doable there. So the windows would certainly need to be replaced to keep this cost somewhere else. It will be cheaper than restoring the windows and more thermally efficient and whatnot. So there's some things like that that a lot of historic preservationists are going to cringe at, but it's going to have to be a go in terms of keeping costs down, in terms of heating costs, everything. I mean, we could restore the double hung windows that are there and double glaze them and go through a whole big process with new mahogany sash. And it's gonna be, you know, there's 31 windows there, and that's gonna be eight grand a window, so they're gonna. But we can replace them with 6/6 proper windows that visually are fine, double glazed, thermally efficient. And, you know, maybe some restoration doors. The HVAC system will be quite expensive. Imagine that will be a, you know, a hydronic system with, you know, hot water baseboard, and then, you know, a heat pump secondary system that will provide some heating and cooling needs. But
We definitely need to address ADA stuff in the building, right?
Of course, yes. Although that doesn't apply to dedicated spaces which would not be for public access on the second floor. I mean, it doesn't right off the second floor.
The first floor, like I said, it's just ramps. but the second floor would need an elevator.
Well, we
So
can't.
Right, which is not,
it's out of the question.
I did an elevator at the Abyssinian Meeting House in Portland, and it was in terms of, it's just, it's not doable. We can't do it.
absolutely.
We do a stair lift. But,
Well, Matt, with your help, we could construct a fiscal note directed to the uses that the committee recommends the building serve. Correct statement.
Does the community navigators serve the RSU 40 or is it just Waldeboro? Her services.
Actually, she's being shared now.
She's
right?
being, she's all of Lincoln County, so not all of RSU 40, just Waldeboro, because Friendship, Warren, and Union are Knox County. They're served by a different Y.
If I may, keeping an eye on the clock, is there a meeting here at 6 o'clock?
Yes,
there is. 6 o'clock. So can I suggest that we appoint a small subcommittee to review and craft the larger committee's recommendations to the select board, and that small committee meet next week and provide a draft back by email. We all confer so that we can meet that deadline.
Yes, I volunteered to be on that committee and I can put together all the information for the in terms of the content of the house and use of the house, but then I would need help with the fiscal phasing.
I can't do a lot of meetings over the course of the next couple of weeks, but I certainly can come up with some numbers and we can sit down.
Okay.
I mean, if
And
that's,
you need this by the 14th? Is that
It
right?
has to be approved by the select board first.
That's okay. They could even have a special for that,
Good.
but the actual warrant, the problem is the printer. It's not the select board. It's how soon we have to get it to the printer.
The wording of this warrant is bothering me now. We really have to say in the warrant that this funding is contingent upon the town coming up with money and how the town is gonna then get the money. Is this warrant to authorize the select board to obtain a rehabilitation loan up to X amount of dollars for the purpose of
So if
starting
you're
this
going to,
rehabilitation?
so what we would do is we would ask the town to, I mean, the easiest way to do it would be to ask the town if they would support funding it through a bond.
That would be the best way.
Not just like putting a $500,000 in the budget, but saying it would be a bond and
A bond or commercial loan, I don't really care.
it could, either way, our requirement is that we show the amortization of that. So I need a number to be able to show the amortization of that. Now, that doesn't, but there would probably be also wording in there that would say, you know, minus any grants we get. If you'll recall, that was part of the school issue had where it didn't say we will reduce the amount of funding needed by the taxpayer by any grants we receive. So I would want like that in there. You would have to say that.
I'd refer to a borrowing as opposed to a bond or a loan.
Borrowing some sort of.
A borrowing.
It would have to be, it would meet our bond attorneys, our our attorneys' requirements.
Yes.
and in terms of the estimate that I come up with, actually, I'm gonna have to have some information about, septic, sewer and water, and whatnot. Who's the horse's mouth on that? Like, do we get any help from the town bringing that there? I mean, this is a potentially really big cost. So,
Well, the water's already there. It would be the sewer.
Sewer.
I can remind people
that'd be great.
Yeah, it's a.
when they, in Damascotta, when they built the public restrooms. Isn't that like $400,000 or something? Six, I mean, it's brick, it's nice and stuff, but that was ridiculous. So we've got a good start on our restrooms is my point.
I spent over $300,000 on the last set of bathrooms in one of our parks. That would have been 2009, 300 grand then. So we we have a big leg up by having a house, a facility, and frankly, the ductile iron in that house is pretty good. I wouldn't even replace it.
Carl, I would just,
The ductile iron,
I would just ask
very waste event.
that at some point, you're gonna have to vote to send these recommendations to the select board as a committee.
Okay, can we do that by email? Is that permitted?
No, you're gonna have to call a meeting. You can do it,
A quick Zoom.
Do it
a
Zoom.
quick
Yeah,
Zoom
okay.
meeting.
Oh,
Yeah, you can do it Zoom.
Everyone's fine with this? Let's prove. That's
All right, well, if we would set that date then now, and then charge our subcommittee, presently composed of only 2 people, but maybe there'll be others. Is there a date that makes sense? For a Zoom meeting?
Why were people saying April 14th? That's a Sunday.
It is a Sunday. So
It's the 16th.
But
now.
you want it to be presented to the select board next week on the 9th?
They can have a special if you're not done
Okay.
by the 9th.
I mean, I'm guessing to set a new next meeting, a Zoom meeting, it'd have to be next week for people. I don't know, see in the next few days, getting this all together, right? You need a week at least.
I can do it in a few days. I did this a year ago.
Okay.
So we're pretty close with inflation.
So can we wait to schedule that meeting until we kind of know
It's fine with me.
we're almost done? Yeah,
why don't we tentatively schedule a meeting for April 8th at 4:30?
okay.
And then
Oh,
This
I
week,
was gonna mention the eclipse in
Well,
case.
that's the eclipse. I will
Oh,
not
yeah,
be-
we can't do that.
And I will not have internet.
People think, oh,
Up in the county.
I thought of that.
How about the 9th?
Just earlier,
Yeah,
yeah.
Do it at 4 before the select board meeting.
I thought the sun's the one that doesn't exist after the.
Is that no on the 9th?
select boards.
No, we're making jokes.
Poor Morgan didn't get to go.
Okay.
That's great. I've learned so much.
Yes.
Should we say 4 PM on the 9th?
Yeah.
Okay, this could be via Zoom, it's not.
Yeah.
And this is for the narrow purpose.
Just voting on the language that we've come up with for what would appear on the warrant, and we'll work together, and I'll work with you, Carl will be involved, and then I'll loop
Mhm.
Julie
Max.
in and Max in, so we should be fine by the presentation.
4 o'clock on the 9th.
With that, I think we can move on, but let's speak to Morgan for just a moment, please. It's just, can you,
Know what to say.
yep. You tell us how we canceled everything and going to cancel more because of the weather.
There you go. Took the words right out of my mouth. We were gonna go visit it on Thursday. I'm guessing that's not gonna happen due to the nor'easter. Maybe it'll be gone by Thursday morning,
Was that Friday?
Yes, Thursday,
Thursday.
all day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you 6 PM meeting?
So,
Are you Carl?
yes, I'm Carl.
I see so many emails, I don't know how faces there.
She mostly sees my emails about killing knotweed, but Michael and I just very, very quickly did take a walk. We'll save this for next month because Morgan will have a lot more to tell us. We did a preliminary study of about a half-mile loop, which would be an ADA compliant pathway, in American, a Barriers Act compliant pathway, kind of a no-brainer. Stuff John Daigle and a few volunteers in a few months get knocked
Also,
out.
there is so much grant money for ADA trails right now. It is like a very hot topic, so.
So can we, but didn't we say Friday? In the
Thurs-
Thursday?
I thought it was
No,
Thursday.
in the Friday at 9:30 is what I've got in my.
Oh,
We said Thursday, but,
oh yeah, my,
okay, so is that all for this meeting though, Carl?
yeah.
Well, lastly, does the town authorize a public use of Sylvania?
Well, I was just gonna ask Julie about it separately. We don't need,
That's separate.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's fine. Well, a motion to adjourn? Jim,